Millionaire got humble woman pregnant. Everyone laughed at him, but 7 years later they regretted it. Adrian, a former tech mogul, and Elowen, an artist with a strong spirit, navigate the challenges of love, parenthood, and societal expectations in the vibrant backdrop of Los Angeles. As their daughter Amara brings new joy and meaning to their lives, Adrian faces the lingering shadows of his past and the judgments of his old social circle. Can their love withstand the pressures of two different worlds, or will the weight of expectations tear them apart? The sun streamed through the expansive windows of Adrian Stiles' penthouse, casting a warm glow over the sleek, modern furniture. It was a typical day in Los Angeles, the kind where the sky was a brilliant blue, and the air was filled with the distant sounds of traffic and laughter. Adrian stood by the kitchen island, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, reviewing the latest figures from his tech company on his tablet. Elowen Pierce entered the kitchen with a soft smile, her hair cascading in gentle waves down her shoulders. She wore a simple sundress that floated around her knees, a stark contrast to the designer suits that often populated Adrian's world. She had that glow, an unmistakable radiance that came with the news she had to share. "Good morning," she said, her voice light and melodic, breaking Adrian's concentration. "Morning, beautiful," he replied, looking up to meet her gaze. "How did you sleep?" "Like a baby," she said, crossing the room to pour herself a glass of orange juice. "But I have something to tell you." Adrian's brow furrowed slightly. "What is it?" Elowen took a deep breath, her heart racing as she approached him. "I think we need to talk about us. About the future." His pulse quickened. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is great," she assured him, her eyes sparkling with excitement and a hint of nervousness. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air for a moment, and Adrian blinked, his mind racing to grasp the gravity of what she had just said. "Pregnant?" he echoed, a mix of disbelief and joy washing over him. "Are you sure?" She nodded, her smile growing wider. "I took 3 tests, all positive. I wanted to tell you in person." Adrian let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "Wow, this is incredible." He stepped closer, his heart swelling with a mixture of emotions, excitement, fear, and a deep sense of responsibility. "Are you okay? How do you feel about it?" "I'm excited," she admitted, her voice softening. "But I also know this changes everything. I can't help but think about how people will react." Adrian's face fell slightly as he remembered the world they lived in. "You mean my world," he said quietly. "The tech industry, the parties, the expectations. It's not exactly a family-friendly environment." "I know," she replied, her eyes searching his for understanding. "But we can figure this out. Together." Just then, the sound of laughter erupted from the living room, pulling Adrian's focus momentarily away from Elowen. It was his friends, a group of wealthy tech entrepreneurs who often gathered at his place for impromptu meetings and celebrations. The laughter grew louder, and Adrian felt a tightness in his chest. "I should probably go out there," he said reluctantly, looking back at her. "They'll be wondering where I am. Do you want me to come with you?" Elowen asked, her expression shifting to concern. No. Adrian shook his head, forcing a smile. "I think it's better if you stay here. I'll handle it." As he walked toward the living room, Elowen felt a pang of worry. She knew how his friends could be, judgmental and quick to mock. The idea of Adrian having to share their news filled her with anxiety. But she also believed in their bond, in the love they had cultivated over the past few months. Adrian stepped into the living room, where 4 of his closest friends were lounging on the plush couches, drinks in hand. The atmosphere was lively, filled with banter and playful jabs. "There he is," shouted Jake, a tall man with an infectious laugh. "What were you doing in the kitchen?" "Hiding from us." Adrian forced a grin, trying to shake off the weight of his earlier conversation with Elowen. "Just refueling," he said, grabbing a glass of whiskey from the bar cart. "Come on, man. We were just talking about how you've gone soft since you started dating that girl." Another friend chimed in, slapping Adrian on the back. "What's next? Are you going to start wearing cardigans and attending yoga classes?" "Very funny, Eric," Adrian replied, attempting to keep his tone light. "I'm still the same guy." "Sure you are. But the parties have gotten a lot less wild since you brought her around," Jake teased. raising his glass in mock toast. To Adrian and his new life. The group erupted in laughter, and Adrian's stomach twisted. He felt like he was caught in a spotlight, the warmth of the jokes turning into something uncomfortable. Yeah, he said, trying to brush off their comments. You'll all see. It's not as bad as you think. Oh, really? Eric leaned in closer, a smirk on his face. So, when's the wedding? Are you going to start a family? I mean, she's nice and all, but you know this is a whole different ballgame, right? Adrian felt his heart race, his mind flashing back to Elowen's words. Actually, he began gathering his courage. We're expecting a baby. Silence fell over the room, the laughter dying abruptly. Adrian's friends exchanged incredulous glances, their expressions a mix of disbelief and amusement. Wait, you're serious? Jake finally asked, leaning back in his seat, clearly taken aback. Yeah, Adrian said, his voice steadier than he felt. I'm serious. The moment felt heavy with tension as the reality of his announcement sunk in. The laughter that had once filled the room was replaced by a silence that felt almost deafening. Wow, man, Eric said, shaking his head. That's unexpected. Unexpected. Adrian repeated, irritation creeping into his tone. Why is that so hard to believe? I'm not some playboy who can't settle down. Whoa, easy there, Jake interjected, raising his hands defensively. No one's saying that. It's just you? A dad? That's a big shift. Adrian clenched his jaw, feeling the weight of their disbelief bearing down on him. Well, I'm ready for it, he asserted, his voice firm. Elowen and I are going to make this work. Good luck with that, Eric said, a hint of sarcasm in his voice. No offense, but you're going to need it. I mean, you're going to trade in your luxurious lifestyle for diaper duty? That's a bold choice. Adrian felt a flush of anger rise within him. You guys just don't get it, he said, his voice rising slightly. It's not about the money or the lifestyle. It's about family. Something you all seem to have forgotten. The laughter that once filled the room had evaporated, replaced by an awkward tension. Adrian turned away, feeling the weight of his friend's judgment like a heavy shroud. He needed to escape. As he stepped back into the kitchen, the bright sunlight felt like a stark contrast to the dark cloud that had settled over him. He leaned against the counter, trying to catch his breath, when Elowen walked in, her expression concerned. What happened? She asked, her eyes searching his face for answers. They just don't understand, Adrian admitted, running a hand through his hair. Just like her mother. Adrian chuckled, his heart swelling with pride as he watched his daughter's innocent delight. Or a scientist. She might want to discover the secret behind bubble making, he teased, his voice light but underlined with the weight of his thoughts. It had been 7 years since Amara's birth, and in that time, Adrian had transformed in ways he never thought possible. He was no longer the carefree tech mogul known for lavish parties and extravagant gifts. Now, he found joy in simpler things, like watching his daughter play. Maybe both. Elowen replied, her tone thoughtful as she leaned back on her arms, letting the sun warm her face. She can create beautiful things and understand how they work. I'd love that. Me too, Adrian said, his gaze drifting from Amara to Elowen. You've taught her so much already, you know? I see the way she looks at you. Elowen turned to him, a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. I'm just being myself, but I hope I'm doing it right. Sometimes I feel like I'm not enough, like I can't give her everything she deserves. Don't say that, Adrian said firmly, sitting up straighter. You are everything to her. You're the reason she smiles so brightly. You've given her a sense of wonder that I could never instill in her. He reached out, taking her hand in his, squeezing it gently. You're an incredible mother, Elowen. She bit her lip, a mix of gratitude and uncertainty dancing in her expression. You think so? I know so, he replied, his voice steady. And you've made me a better person, too. The conversation was interrupted by a group of familiar voices approaching. Adrian's heart sank as he recognized the laughter of his old friends, the ones who had once mocked his choices, the ones who had deemed him a fool for falling in love with Elowen. He caught Elowen's eye, and for a brief moment, they shared a silent understanding, a bond forged in the fire of judgment and resilience. Look who it is, one of the men called out, his tone laced with faux joviality. The tech genius and his beautiful companion. Adrian forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes as they approached. "Hey guys," he said, trying to mask the tension rising within him. "Nice to see you." "Nice to see you too, man." "Didn't expect to find you here, playing the dad role." Another friend chimed in, laughter following his words. Elowen tensed beside him, her fingers tightening around his. He could feel her discomfort, and it pained him. "We come here often," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "Amara loves the park." "Right," the first friend said, his eyes shifting to Amara, who was now sitting in the grass, blowing bubbles with sheer fascination. "She's adorable." "So what's the deal? You've traded in your billionaire lifestyle for bubble blowing and picnics." Adrian felt a surge of protectiveness rise within him. "It's not a trade," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "This is what I want. This is happiness." Elowen glanced up at him, surprise flashing in her eyes. She hadn't expected him to stand up for their family so openly. "Adrian is right," she said, her voice steady despite the slight tremor. "We've created a beautiful life together, one that's rich with love and laughter." The men exchanged glances, and Adrian could see their surprise morph into something else, perhaps a hint of respect, or maybe just confusion. "I didn't mean to offend," one of them said, his tone shifting slightly. "It's just different, you know?" "Different isn't bad," Adrian replied, his resolve hardening. "What you see as a downgrade, I see as an upgrade. I've learned what truly matters." "Are you saying we're all missing out on this family life?" another friend asked, skepticism lacing his tone. Elowen took a deep breath, deciding to step further into the conversation. "Not at all. But life is more than just parties and money. It's about connection and love. Those are the things that last." The friends exchanged glances again, and Adrian could see their expressions shifting. The laughter that once felt mocking now seemed distant. "You really believe that?" one of them asked, genuinely curious. "I do," Adrian said, meeting their gaze with confidence. "I've seen the emptiness that comes with chasing after status." Elowen opened my eyes to what it means to truly live. "And Amara? She's our greatest adventure." Silence enveloped them for a moment, interrupted only by Amara's joyful squeals as she chased another bubble. Elowen smiled at their daughter, and the warmth in her gaze seemed to radiate through the air, softening the tension that had filled the space. "Yeah, man. It's different, but it sounds nice," one of the friends admitted, scratching his head. "I guess we never really thought about it that way." "Maybe you should," Elowen said gently, her voice carrying a kindness that surprised even her. "There's a lot of beauty in the mundane, in the everyday moments that make up a life." Adrian watched as their friends exchanged words, the walls of judgment slowly crumbling. He could feel the shift, the acceptance beginning to take root. It was a long process, but he hoped this was a step in the right direction. "Hey, maybe we should all hang out sometime," one of the men suggested, a hint of genuine interest in his tone. "You know, get to know this new version of you better." "Yeah, I'd like that," Adrian said, a smile breaking through the tension. "Let's plan something." As the conversation continued, Adrian caught Elowen's eye again, and this time, the look they shared was filled with hope. The past was not something they could change, but the future? That was theirs to shape. And for the first time in a long time, Adrian felt a sense of closure, a release from the expectations that had once burdened him. "Look at her," Elowen whispered, nodding towards Amara, who was now rolling around in the grass, her laughter echoing like music in the air. "She's so happy." "She is," Adrian replied, his heart full. "And that happiness is everything." In that moment, surrounded by old friends and new beginnings, Adrian realized that the life he had chosen was not just a choice, it was a blessing. And as they all stood together, he knew that love, in all its forms, was the greatest success of all. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over Griffith Park as Adrian and Elowen strolled hand in hand, the familiar laughter of children echoing around them. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that felt timeless, both a reminder of the past and a hint of the future. Their daughter, Amara, darted ahead, her laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of birds, filling the air with pure joy. "Look at her, Adrian," Elowen said, a soft smile gracing her lips as she watched Amara chase a group of ducks that quacked in protest. She's so full of life. I can't believe how fast she's growing." Adrian's gaze softened as he watched their daughter, whose wild curls bounced with each step. "I know. It feels like just yesterday we were in the hospital, scared out of our minds." He chuckled, shaking his head at the memory. "I thought I would pass out from the stress of it all." "Me too," Elowen replied, her voice light, laced with nostalgia. "But you were so brave, holding my hand and telling me everything would be okay. I don't think I could have done it without you." He met her gaze, the warmth in his chest expanding. "You were the brave one. You brought Amara into this world. You've been amazing every step of the way." They exchanged a knowing glance, the kind that spoke volumes of their journey together. The early days had been fraught with challenges, the laughter of their friends distant and mocking. But now, standing in the park, surrounded by the vitality of life, they could feel the weight of those judgments dissipating. "Mom, Dad, look!" Amara shouted, her face lighting up as she pointed toward the playground. She had spotted a cluster of children climbing and swinging, the epitome of childhood freedom. Without waiting for a reply, she dashed toward the swings, her giggles trailing behind her like a melody. "Let's go," Adrian said, squeezing Elowen's hand before they followed their daughter. As they approached, the sight warmed their hearts. Amara climbed onto the swing, her small legs pumping back and forth with determination, her laughter spilling into the air. "Higher, Mommy. Push me higher," she squealed, and Elowen couldn't resist the urge to comply, gently pushing Amara, who soared higher with each thrust. "Isn't she just the best?" Elowen said, her eyes sparkling with pride as she leaned closer to Adrian. "She's everything we dreamed of." Adrian nodded, his heart swelling. "Yeah, she's incredible. And look at how happy she is." He glanced around the park, taking in the families enjoying their day, the normalcy that had once felt so far away when they first started their journey. "It's amazing how far we've come." Just then, a familiar voice broke through the ambient sounds of laughter and chatter. "Adrian? Elowen? Is that really you?" Both turned to see a group of their old friends approaching, faces illuminated with surprise. Adrian's heart raced as he recognized them. Faces from the past that had once laughed at his choices, people who had turned their backs when he had chosen love over status. "Wow, it's been ages," one of the women exclaimed, her eyes wide. "You two look different." "Happy." Elowen's demeanor shifted slightly, a hint of apprehension flickering in her eyes. Hi. It's good to see you." "Yeah, it's been a while," Adrian added, trying to keep his tone light. "We've been busy with life." "Life? You mean being a dad?" Another man chimed in, a smirk on his face that brought back memories of their past ridicule. "I always wondered how long you could last in that role." Elowen stiffened, her grip tightening on Adrian's hand. But before she could respond, Amara bounded over, her face flushed with excitement. "Look, everyone. I can swing so high," she proclaimed, her innocence cutting through the tension. "Wow, look at you go," one of the women said, bending down to meet Amara's gaze. "You're so brave. Just like your dad." "Yeah, just like him." Amara beamed, her joy infectious. The adults couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm, and the ice began to thaw. Adrian took a deep breath, the weight of the past still heavy on his shoulders. "So, what have you guys been up to?" he asked, hoping to steer the conversation away from the awkwardness. "Oh, you know, the usual," said the man who had smirked earlier. "Business, travel. But honestly, it's nothing compared to what we see on social media." "Your foundation, Adrian? Impressive work. We've heard a lot about it." Elowen raised an eyebrow, surprised by the sudden change in tone. "You've been following our journey?" "Of course. It's hard not to," the woman replied earnestly. "It's inspiring, really. You took a leap of faith, and it seems to have paid off." Adrian felt a flicker of something he hadn't expected: acceptance. "Thanks. It's been a rewarding experience. We're trying to make a difference, you know." "Yeah, I can see that," the man said, his earlier bravado fading. "I didn't think you'd stick with it, honestly. I mean, it's a big change from your old life." "People change," Elowen interjected, her voice steady. "And sometimes they find themselves in unexpected places." The group fell silent for a moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Adrian could see the gears turning in their friends' minds, the realization dawning that perhaps they had misjudged him. "Listen, I'm really sorry for how we treated you before," the woman finally said, her tone sincere. "We were wrong to laugh at your choices. Clearly, you've built something beautiful together." "Yeah," Adrian added, looking at Elowen, a smile creeping onto his face. "We really have. And it's been the best decision of my life. Can we start over?" the man asked, extending his hand toward Adrian, who hesitated for a moment before shaking it, feeling the weight of the past lift just a little. "Sure," Adrian replied, feeling Elowen's support beside him. "We all grow, right?" As they stood there, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows on the grass. The laughter of Amara filled the space, a reminder of the joy that had blossomed out of uncertainty. In that moment, Adrian felt a sense of closure, a release from the judgments that had once haunted him. "Let's take a picture," Amara chirped, running back to them with her hands raised, and without hesitation, the group gathered around, smiles brighter than the sun above. "Say family," one of the friends called out, and as they posed together, Adrian felt a warmth spreading through his chest. The laughter and acceptance enveloped them all, a new beginning forged in an afternoon that had once seemed so ordinary. As the camera captured their smiles, Adrian glanced at Elowen, her eyes sparkling with pride. He knew then that they had come full circle. The laughter that had once been a source of pain now transformed into a symphony of acceptance and love. Together, they had built a life that was richer than any wealth he had ever known, and in that moment, surrounded by friends and family, he felt truly at home. "They think this is a joke." Elowen stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "Forget them. What matters is us. We're going to figure this out together, I promise." Looking into her eyes, Adrian felt a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. "You're right. I just wish it didn't have to be so hard. I want to protect you and our baby. And you will," she said softly, squeezing his arm. "We'll build our own life, one step at a time." Adrian took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. "Okay, together then." "Together," Elowen echoed, her smile returning, a beacon of light in the midst of uncertainty. The sun hung high in the Los Angeles sky, casting a warm golden hue over the sprawling city. Adrian Stiles, a titan of the tech industry with a life filled with lavish parties and high-stakes business deals, found himself standing on the balcony of his penthouse, a storm of emotions brewing within him. The laughter of his friends echoed in his mind, their jests and jibes cutting deeper than he had anticipated. The news of Elowen's pregnancy had been met with incredulity, and he felt the weight of their scorn pressing down on him. "Adrian, come on. You can't be serious about her." One of his closest friends, Mark, had laughed at the announcement. "What do you see in her? She's just, well, ordinary." A bitter taste filled Adrian's mouth at the memory. He turned away from the cityscape and glanced toward the living room, where Elowen sat curled up on the couch, her fingers delicately tracing the fabric of a baby blanket she had knitted. The sight of her brought an unexpected warmth to his heart, a stark contrast to the disdain of his peers. "Is everything okay?" Elowen's voice broke through his thoughts, gentle and concerned. She looked up, her hazel eyes searching his face for answers. "Yeah, just thinking," he replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. She nodded, but he could see the worry etched on her brow. "About what they said?" "It doesn't matter," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "They don't know you. They don't see how incredible you are." Elowen chuckled softly, but it didn't have the lightness it should have. "Incredible? I'm just a girl from a small town who happened to catch the attention of a millionaire. I don't belong in your world, Adrian." He moved closer, kneeling beside her. "No, you're so much more than that. You're strong, kind, and you make me want to be a better man. I chose you because you're the one I want to build a life with." Her gaze softened, but he could still see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "What if I can't fit into that life? What if I mess everything up?" He took her hands in his, feeling the warmth of her skin against his. "You won't. We'll figure it out together. We're in this as a team." The days melted into weeks, and soon the realities of impending parenthood began to settle in. Adrian found himself torn between his luxurious lifestyle and the responsibilities that came with being a father. He attended lavish parties filled with the elite, but each time he returned home, he felt a growing distance between himself and the world he once knew. One evening, as he prepared to leave for yet another gala, Elowen stood in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. "You're going to that thing again?" "It's important for my business," he replied, adjusting his cufflinks. "Important or just another chance to show off?" She shot back, her voice thick with emotion. He paused, taken aback by her tone. "That's not fair, Elowen. You know I have to maintain these connections. Do you? Or is it just easier to pretend everything's the same?" "Everything is different now," he snapped, frustration spilling over. "Don't you see? I'm trying to balance it all. I can't just abandon my life." "You don't have to abandon it, Adrian, but you could choose to prioritize us. Me. Our baby." The silence that followed was heavy with tension, the air thick with unspoken words. Adrian's heart raced as he struggled to find the right response. "I'm trying. I really am." "Trying isn't enough," she whispered, turning away, her voice tinged with sadness. He felt the sting of her words, but he couldn't shake the feeling of obligation that clung to him like a shadow. As he walked out the door, he glanced back, catching her silhouette framed by the doorway. A pang of guilt washed over him, but he brushed it aside, convincing himself that this was just a phase, that everything would work out in time. A few weeks later, as Elowen's pregnancy progressed, Adrian found himself facing an unexpected challenge. An old flame, Julia, reappeared in his life, her presence a stark reminder of a more carefree time. They met at an industry event, and Julia was as radiant as he remembered, her laughter echoing through the crowded room. "Adrian, it's been ages. I heard you're having a baby." "How exciting," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Yeah, it is," he replied, feeling a mix of nostalgia and unease. "Are you happy?" she asked, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I mean, really happy?" He hesitated, the question hanging in the air. "I am, I think. It's just complicated." "Complicated how?" "You're a millionaire after all. What could possibly be complicated?" Adrian felt a flicker of defensiveness rise within him. "It's not about money, Julia. It's about a life choices, responsibilities." She smirked, leaning in closer. "Life choices, huh? You mean like settling down with someone like Elowen? Is she really what you want?" He shifted uncomfortably, the weight of her words pressing on him. "I love her. She's different from anyone I've ever known." Julia raised an eyebrow, a sly smile playing on her lips. "Different, yes, but can she keep up with you?" With this life, Adrian felt a rush of anger but masked it with a tight smile. "You don't know her. She's stronger than you think. Or maybe you're just trying to convince yourself," she countered, her voice dripping with skepticism. He excused himself from the conversation, the flicker of doubt igniting in his mind. As he drove home that night, he replayed their exchange, questioning his choices and whether he was truly ready for the life he was embarking on with Elowen. When he arrived home, he found Elowen in the nursery, surrounded by baby clothes and toys. She looked up, her expression brightening at his entrance. "How was the gala?" "It was fine," he replied, trying to shake off the unease that clung to him. She studied him carefully, her intuition sharp as ever. "Just fine? You seem off." "It's nothing," he insisted, but the tension between them was palpable. "Elowen, he started, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Adrian, if there's something you need to say, just say it. I can't keep pretending everything's perfect when it's not." He sighed, raking a hand through his hair. "It's just, Julia was there. She asked about us." "Julia?" "Your ex." Elowen's voice was calm, but he could see the flicker of hurt in her eyes. "It was nothing. She was just trying to stir the pot to get under my skin," he said hastily, but the truth was, her words had struck a nerve. "Did you let her?" "I didn't mean to," he replied, his voice dropping. "It's just hard sometimes, balancing everything." "I don't want to hurt you." Elowen stepped closer, her gaze steady. "You're not hurting me, but you need to be honest with yourself. If you're having doubts, it's better to address them now than later." He felt a lump form in his throat, the reality of their situation weighing down on him. "I'm scared, Elowen. Scared of failing you, of not being the man you need." Her expression softened, and she reached for his hand. "We're in this together, remember? You're not alone in this." As they stood in the dim light of the nursery, surrounded by the preparations for their future, Adrian realized that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. But with Elowen by his side, he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps they could forge a path that was uniquely theirs, despite the doubts and uncertainties that loomed. "I love you, Elowen," he said, his voice steady. "And I love you," she replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We'll figure it out together." In that moment, Adrian understood that it wasn't the opinions of others that defined their love. It was the strength they found in each other, the unwavering bond that would carry them through the trials ahead. Adrian stood at the edge of his upscale office, gazing out at the sprawling Los Angeles skyline. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the city, but all he could feel was a heaviness in his chest. The laughter from his colleagues echoed behind him, a cacophony of voices that once would have brought him joy. Now, they felt like daggers, each word a reminder of the ridicule he faced for choosing Elowen. He turned away from the window, the reflections of his past life fading into shadows. "Hey man, you coming to the party tonight?" asked Jason, a close associate, as he sauntered over, drink in hand. His tone was casual, but there was an underlying edge of mockery in his eyes. Adrian forced a smile, though it felt foreign on his lips. "I think I'll sit this one out. Got some family stuff to take care of." Jason raised an eyebrow, unable to hide his smirk. "Family stuff? You mean like changing diapers? Come on, Adrian. You're a millionaire tech mogul. You're not supposed to be playing house." Adrian clenched his fists, feeling the familiar surge of anger. "And what exactly do you think I'm supposed to be doing, Jason? Living a life of excess while my family needs me?" Jason shrugged nonchalantly, taking a sip of his drink, clearly enjoying the banter. "I don't know, man. It just seems like you're throwing it all away. You had it all, money, power, the best parties in town. And now, you're a dad." The word hung in the air like a weight. Adrian opened his mouth to retort but closed it again, realizing there was no point. Instead, he turned his back to Jason and walked away, the laughter and clinking glasses fading behind him. He stepped into the elevator, the mirrored walls reflecting a man in turmoil. Each floor he descended felt like a step away from the life he once embraced. As the doors opened to the ground floor, he was met with a wave of fresh air that felt almost cleansing. He pulled out his phone and texted Elowen, * on my way home. "Can't wait to see you and Amara. * the reply came almost instantly. * can't wait either. Amara is excited to show you her new drawing. * Adrian's heart warmed at the thought. His daughter had a way of filling his life with joy, even on the darkest days. He arrived home to find Elowen sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by a colorful array of crayons and sheets of paper. Amara was a whirlwind of energy, her tiny fingers smudged with colors as she concentrated on her masterpiece. "Look, Daddy," Amara exclaimed, looking up with wide, innocent eyes. "I made a rainbow." Adrian knelt down beside her, his irritation from the office melting away. The drawing was indeed a rainbow, a chaotic swirl of colors that somehow managed to capture the essence of joy. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. You've really outdone yourself." Amara giggled, her laughter filling the room like music. "Can you help me with the sky? It needs more blue." "Of course," he replied, grabbing a blue crayon. As they colored together, he felt the weight of the world lift off his shoulders. Elowen watched them, her heart swelling with pride. "You two look like you're having fun," she said, her voice soft and melodic. She joined them on the floor, her hair cascading around her shoulders like a golden halo. "What do you think of this idea, Amara? A purple sky?" "Yuck." Amara scrunched her nose. "No purple skies. Just blue." Adrian laughed, glancing at Elowen. "Looks like we have a little artist with a strong opinion." Elowen chuckled, her eyes sparkling. Just like her father. The playful banter continued until Amara grew tired and nestled into Elowen's lap, her eyelids fluttering as sleep began to claim her. Adrian watched the scene, a warmth enveloping him. It was moments like this that reminded him of what truly mattered: love, family, and the simple joys of life. Later that night, after putting Amara to bed, he and Elowen sat together on the couch, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating their faces. The silence was comfortable, but Adrian felt a need to voice his thoughts. "Elowen, do you ever wonder if we made the right choices?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. She looked at him, her expression contemplative. "Sometimes, it's hard not to think about what could have been, especially when the world doesn't understand us." Adrian sighed, running a hand through his hair. I never expected it to be this hard. The judgment, the ridicule. I don't regret being with you, but sometimes I feel like I'm losing my old self." Elowen took his hand, her touch grounding him. "You're not losing yourself, Adrian. You're evolving. We both are. The opinions of others don't define us. What matters is that we're happy together." He nodded, but uncertainty still lingered in his mind. "I hope you're right. I just wish I could show my friends that this life can be just as fulfilling." "You will," she reassured him. "In time, they'll see how much you've changed and how much you've grown. You'll show them that true success isn't about money or status. It's about love and family." As the night wore on, Adrian found solace in Elowen's words, but doubts flickered in the back of his mind like shadows. He wanted to believe that their love would conquer all, but the societal pressures weighed heavily on him. Days passed and Adrian found himself at an industry gala. The glitz and glamour surrounding him felt suffocating. He was greeted by familiar faces, but the laughter that filled the room felt hollow. As he mingled with old friends, he couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider in his own life. "Adrian, there you are," called out Sarah, a former colleague, her voice bright yet condescending. "We thought you'd forgotten how to have fun. Still playing house, I see." He forced a smile, trying to brush off the jab. "Just balancing my priorities, Sarah." "Priorities, huh? Like changing diapers and providing for a little girl." She laughed, and her friends joined in, the sound sharp and mocking. Adrian's heart raced, a mix of anger and embarrassment flooding through him. "You know, Sarah, being a father is one of the greatest joys of my life. Maybe you should try it sometime." The laughter died down, and he regretted his outburst immediately. He turned away, seeking refuge in the corner of the room, the chatter and clinking glasses becoming a distant hum. It was then that he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Jason, his expression surprisingly serious. "Hey man, don't let them get to you. They're just jealous." "Jealous?" Adrian scoffed. "Of what? My life of diapers and bottles. Maybe. Or maybe they're just mad because you found something real while they're stuck in a cycle of superficiality." Jason leaned against the wall beside him, a rare moment of camaraderie. "I just wish they could see that there's more to life than what they think is success," Adrian confessed, the weight of his frustration spilling out. "You know, it's easy for them to mock what they don't understand. You're living a life they can't even begin to comprehend. Just keep doing you, man. That's what matters." Adrian nodded, feeling a flicker of appreciation for Jason's words. Maybe he didn't have to convince everyone of his happiness. Perhaps it was enough that he knew it himself. As the night unfolded, he found himself standing a little taller, the laughter around him losing its sting. The conversation shifted back to work and projects, and for the first time, he felt less like an imposter. He had a life outside of wealth, a life filled with love, laughter, and the promise of tomorrow. Returning home, he found Elowen waiting for him by the door, her face lighting up as he stepped inside. "How was the gala?" she asked, her concern evident. "It was enlightening," he replied, pulling her into a warm embrace. "I think I'm finally starting to understand what matters." Elowen smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "I knew you would. It just takes time." As they settled into their evening routine, Adrian felt a sense of peace envelop him. Life would always have its challenges, but with Elowen and Amara by his side, he knew they could face anything together. His heart swelled with hope, and for the first time in a long time, he embraced the chaos of his new life, ready to discover the beauty hidden within it. The sun hung high in the Los Angeles sky, casting a warm glow over the sprawling urban landscape. The laughter of children echoed in the distance, mingling with the rustling leaves of the park where Adrian and Elowen sat on a picnic blanket, watching their daughter Amara chase after the bubbles that danced in the air. It had been 7 years since their lives had been turned upside down by the unexpected news of Elowen's pregnancy, and now, as they enjoyed this simple afternoon, it felt like a celebration of everything they had built together. Amara, with her wild curls and bright blue eyes, giggled as she reached out to pop a bubble. Her laughter was contagious, and Elowen couldn't help but smile as she watched her daughter's joy unfold. Adrian, sitting cross-legged beside Elowen, leaned back on his hands, a soft smile gracing his lips. He wore a casual t-shirt and shorts, a stark contrast to the tailored suits that once defined his public persona. This was a new Adrian, one molded by love and the responsibilities of fatherhood. "Do you remember our first picnic here?" Elowen asked, her eyes sparkling with nostalgia. She plucked a blade of grass and twirled it between her fingers, her thoughts drifting back to that day. "It was so different then, wasn't it?" Adrian chuckled, the sound rich and warm. "I remember you bringing those awful sandwiches. I thought I'd never eat another crustless piece of bread in my life." He feigned a look of horror, and Elowen erupted into laughter, the tension of life's complexities momentarily forgotten. "They were not awful. You were just spoiled by all those fancy restaurants," she teased, nudging him playfully. "Besides, I thought you'd appreciate something homemade." "I appreciate you," Adrian replied, his tone shifting to sincerity. He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers, and Elowen felt a familiar warmth spread through her. More than anything. Just then, Amara darted back toward them, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Mommy, Daddy, look what I found." She held up a small, colorful rock, its surface glistening in the sunlight. Elowen leaned forward, her eyes widening in delight. "Oh wow, sweetheart. That's beautiful. Where did you find it?" "Over there." Amara pointed toward the small garden that bordered the park. "Can we keep it? Please." Adrian exchanged a glance with Elowen, his heart swelling with pride at their daughter's enthusiasm. "Of course we can keep it," he said, smiling at Amara. "But you have to promise to take care of it." "I will. I promise," Amara exclaimed, bouncing on her toes. The innocence of her joy reminded Adrian of how far they had come, of the laughter that had once been overshadowed by doubt and ridicule. As the afternoon wore on, the park began to fill with families. The sounds of laughter and chatter grew louder, and Adrian found himself scanning the crowd, a sense of unease creeping in. He had always felt a twinge of anxiety in social situations, especially when it came to facing his former friends, those who had once mocked his relationship with Elowen. But he pushed the thought aside. Today was about family. "Adrian," Elowen's voice cut through his thoughts, gentle yet probing. "Are you okay? You seem a little distant." He turned to her, seeing the concern etched on her face. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking about the past, I guess." "About them?" she asked softly, her thumb brushing over his hand. "You don't have to worry. We're not the same people we were back then." "I know," he admitted, taking a deep breath. "But sometimes I wonder what they think now. Do they see us? Do they understand?" Elowen's expression softened. "I think it takes time for people to see beyond their own perceptions. But look at us, Adrian. We've built something beautiful. Our family is everything." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "You're right. I just don't want Amara to feel judged because of who we are or where we came from." "She won't," Elowen reassured him. "We'll teach her to stand tall and proud, no matter what others say. She's a Stiles Pierce, and that means she's strong." Amara, overhearing the conversation, ran back to them, her small hands clutching the rock tightly. "Mommy, Daddy, can we go on the swings now?" Her eyes sparkled with uncontained enthusiasm. "Absolutely," Elowen replied, pushing her worries aside. "Let's go." The three of them made their way to the swings, and as Adrian pushed Amara higher into the air, he felt the moment crystallize into something perfect. The laughter of his daughter filled the air, mingling with the rustling of the trees, and for a moment, all doubts faded into the background. "Higher, Daddy. Higher." Amara squealed, her hair streaming behind her like a golden banner. Adrian obliged, pushing her gently, while Elowen watched with a smile, her heart swelling with love. A sudden commotion at the edge of the park drew Adrian's attention. He squinted against the sun and recognized a familiar face, one of his former colleagues from the tech industry, Jason, who had always been one of the most vocal critics of Adrian's choices. Adrian felt a knot tighten in his stomach, but Elowen's hand on his arm calmed him. "Don't let them ruin this moment," she whispered. "Focus on us." The moment Jason spotted Adrian, his eyes widened in surprise, and he began to approach, flanked by a couple of other familiar faces from the past. The laughter that had once accompanied their friendship felt like a distant memory, replaced by a tension that hung heavy in the air. "Adrian, wow, it's been a while," Jason called out, his tone somewhat forced as he approached. There was a hint of disbelief in his eyes, as if he couldn't reconcile the man he saw before him with the one who had once been an object of ridicule. "Hey, Jason," Adrian replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "How have you been?" Good. Just busy with work. You know how it is," Jason said, glancing at Amara, who was still swinging. "Nice to see you're well happy." Amara jumped off the swing and ran to Elowen, her tiny hands reaching for her mother. "Mommy, can I have a snack?" she asked, her voice bright and innocent. "Of course, sweetheart," Elowen said, kneeling to rummage through the picnic basket. "What do you want?" As Elowen prepared a snack for Amara, Adrian stood awkwardly in front of Jason and the others, feeling the weight of their judgment. "We've been enjoying our time as a family," he said, trying to sound nonchalant. "It's been a rewarding experience." "Yeah, I can see that," Jason replied, the hint of skepticism still lingering in his tone. "You always were a bit of an oddball, Adrian. But hey, whatever works for you, right?" Adrian's jaw clenched slightly, but he forced a smile. "Thanks, Jason. It works for us." He felt Elowen's hand brush against his back, a silent reminder of their strength together. "Adrian, are you still working in tech?" one of the other former colleagues asked, a hint of curiosity in their voice. "Not in the same way, no. I've shifted my focus to philanthropy," he said, his voice firm. "I started a foundation to help families in need. It's been fulfilling." "Philanthropy, huh?" Jason raised an eyebrow, a hint of skepticism still apparent. "That's different. I mean, it's great and all, but how's that working out for you?" "Really well, actually," Adrian replied, meeting Jason's gaze head-on. "It's given me a purpose beyond just making money. It's about making a difference." Amara returned, a granola bar in hand, and Adrian felt a rush of pride as she joined them. "Look, I'm a superhero," she exclaimed, holding her snack aloft as if it were a trophy. The laughter that followed was genuine, cutting through the tension that had hung in the air. For a moment, it felt as though the past could be laid to rest, that the judgments and criticisms could be replaced by something more meaningful. Elowen placed a hand on Adrian's arm, her eyes shining with support. "We're happy, and that's what matters," she said softly. "Yeah," Adrian replied, feeling more confident as he spoke. "We're building a life that we love. And honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything." As they stood together, Adrian realized that the echoes of laughter from his past no longer held power over him. The journey he had taken with Elowen had transformed him, and he was no longer the man they had once mocked. He was a father, a partner, and a man who had found joy in the simplest of moments. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the park, Adrian and Elowen shared a look that spoke volumes. They had weathered the storms of doubt and judgment, and now they stood united, ready to face whatever the future held, together. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the bustling streets of Los Angeles. Adrian Stiles, once a man defined by his wealth and extravagant lifestyle, now found himself navigating the complexities of fatherhood and love. It had been 6 years since he and Elowen had welcomed their daughter, Amara, into the world. Their lives had changed in ways he could hardly have imagined, yet the echoes of their past still lingered, especially when it came to the judgment of others. The park was alive with the sounds of laughter and the rustle of leaves. Adrian sat on a bench, his eyes following Amara as she dashed across the grass, her pigtails bouncing joyfully with each step. Elowen was nearby, engrossed in a conversation with a friend from her art class, but Adrian's thoughts drifted back to the early days of their relationship, the doubts, the criticisms, the moments when he felt torn between two worlds. "Hey, look at her go," Elowen exclaimed, her voice filled with pride as she pointed toward their daughter. "I can't believe how fast she's growing up." Adrian turned to her, his heart swelling at the sight of Elowen's radiant smile. She had blossomed in ways he hadn't anticipated, her confidence blooming alongside their daughter. "She's a natural," he replied, a hint of awe in his voice. "Just like her mother." Elowen chuckled, her eyes sparkling. "You know, sometimes I still can't believe we're actually doing this. Raising a child in this crazy city. It feels surreal." "Surreal, but beautiful," Adrian said, leaning back against the bench. The weight of his past still clung to him, but the laughter of Amara and the warmth of Elowen's presence made it easier to bear. "I wouldn't trade it for anything." As they watched Amara play, a group of familiar faces strolled into the park, their laughter ringing out like a siren call. Adrian's heart sank momentarily. They were his old friends, the very ones who had mocked his choices when he first got involved with Elowen. He instinctively tensed, anticipating their judgmental glances, the snickers behind raised hands. "Adrian," one of them called out, a broad grin spreading across his face. It was Mark, a former business partner, who had always been quick to ridicule Adrian's shift in priorities. "Look who it is. The family man." Elowen's expression shifted, her brow furrowing slightly. Adrian could feel her tension as she turned to face the group, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension in her eyes. "Hi, Mark," Adrian replied, forcing a smile. "How have you been?" "Busy as always." Mark gestured to the others, who were now approaching. "You know how it is. But hey, can you believe this guy? The kid? You? I mean, who would have thought?" "Yeah, who would have thought?" Another friend chimed in, feigning surprise. "The Adrian Stiles, starting a family? What's next? A minivan." The chuckles from the group felt like daggers, aimed directly at Elowen. Adrian's jaw clenched as he felt the rush of anger rise within him. He wanted to defend their choices, to tell them just how happy he was, but the words caught in his throat. Elowen, however, stepped forward, her chin held high. "You know, it's not about what you expected of Adrian or me. It's about what we've built together." Her voice was steady, a quiet strength emanating from her. "Amara is the best thing that's ever happened to us." The group fell silent for a moment, taken aback by her confidence. Adrian felt a surge of pride for Elowen, her resilience shining through. But before he could say anything, Mark smirked, leaning back against a nearby tree. "Sure, but you have to admit, you two are an odd match. A tech mogul and what do you call it? An artist. An artist with dreams and aspirations." Elowen shot back, her gaze unwavering. "And someone who enriches Adrian's life in ways you'll never understand." Adrian felt a rush of warmth at her words. "Exactly," he added, stepping closer to Elowen. "We may be different, but that's what makes us work." "I've never been happier." Mark raised an eyebrow, his expression shifting from mockery to something more contemplative. "You really mean that?" "I do," Adrian replied, his voice firm. "I thought success was measured by money and power, but now I see it's about love, family, and the connections we make. I wouldn't trade this life for anything." "Wow, look at you two," another friend said, a hint of genuine curiosity in their tone. "It sounds like you've really changed." Elowen smiled softly, her eyes softening as she looked at Adrian. "We've both changed, and we're still learning. Every day is a new challenge, but it's worth it." As the conversation unfolded, Adrian felt a shift in the air. The laughter that had once felt so mocking was now tinged with something different. Recognition, perhaps? Acknowledgement of their journey? He hoped so. "Listen, I'm sorry if we ever made you feel less than," Mark finally said, scratching the back of his head awkwardly. "We just didn't understand. I mean, it's not every day you see a guy like you settling down." "It's not about what others think," Adrian replied, feeling a newfound sense of freedom. "What matters is what's in here." He placed a hand over his heart. "And what we've created together." The mood lightened, the tension easing as they continued to chat. Amara ran over, her cheeks flushed from playing, her laughter ringing like music. "Daddy, Mommy, look what I found." She held up a shiny rock, her eyes wide with excitement. Adrian knelt down to her level, his heart swelling with love. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. Did you find it all by yourself?" "Yes, it's my treasure," Amara declared, beaming with pride. Elowen knelt beside Adrian, her hand resting gently on Amara's shoulder. "Every treasure needs a special place, don't you think?" Amara nodded vigorously. "Yes. Can we take it home and put it in a special box?" "Of course," Adrian said, his voice filled with warmth. "It'll be our family treasure." As they shared a moment of laughter, Adrian glanced at the group of friends who had gathered around them. The earlier mockery seemed to have dissipated, replaced by genuine smiles and a sense of camaraderie. For the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of acceptance, as if their past judgments had started to melt away. "Maybe we could all catch up sometime?" Adrian suggested, his eyes scanning the faces of his old friends. "I'd like to show you what we've been up to, and maybe you can share your stories too." "Yeah, I'd like that," Mark replied, surprising Adrian with his sincerity. "It's easy to judge from the outside, but I can see you're really happy. That's what matters." As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the park, Adrian squeezed Elowen's hand. In that moment, surrounded by laughter and love, he realized that their journey had led them to a beautiful place, a place where acceptance and understanding flourished, creating a bond stronger than any societal expectation. "Let's take a picture," Elowen suggested, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "We need to capture this moment." As they gathered together, Adrian, Elowen, and Amara, he felt a sense of belonging that had long eluded him. The laughter of their friends echoed in the background, blending seamlessly with the joy radiating from his family. In that moment, the past faded away, leaving only the promise of a future filled with love, acceptance, and the beauty of their uniquely crafted life together. The sun hung high in the sky on that bright Saturday afternoon, casting a warm glow over Griffith Park. Families dotted the landscape, their laughter mingling with the chirping of birds, creating a symphony of joy that filled the air. Adrian Stiles and Elowen Pierce strolled along the path, hand in hand, their daughter Amara skipping ahead, her laughter ringing out like music. "Look, Mommy. Look, Daddy," Amara called out, pointing at a cluster of colorful kites dancing against the azure backdrop. The sight was enchanting, vibrant kites soaring high, each one telling its own story against the wind. Elowen smiled, her heart swelling with pride and love as she watched her daughter, so full of life and wonder. "Let's go get one, shall we?" she suggested, glancing at Adrian, whose expression mirrored her enthusiasm. Adrian chuckled softly, brushing a hand through his tousled hair. "Are you sure you want to run that marathon? I think I might just need a coffee while you both get your workout in." "Come on, Adrian." Elowen playfully nudged him with her shoulder. "You can't let our daughter see you being lazy on a beautiful day like today." He feigned a dramatic sigh, but his eyes sparkled with affection. "All right, you win. But only if you promise I can sip my coffee while watching you too." "Deal," she laughed, her smile radiating warmth. As they approached the kite bender, the smell of roasted nuts and cotton candy wafted through the air, intoxicating and nostalgic. Amara tugged at Elowen's hand, her excitement palpable. "Mommy, can I get the red one?" "Please, please, please." Elowen knelt down, meeting her daughter's gaze. "Of course, sweetheart. But remember, we have to share it, okay?" Amara nodded vigorously, her eyes shining with mischief. "Okay, I'll let you hold it first." While Elowen purchased the kite, Adrian stood back, leaning against a nearby tree, watching the two most important women in his life interact. His heart swelled with a mixture of love and gratitude, reflecting on how much had changed since that fateful day when Elowen revealed her pregnancy. "Hey," he called out, breaking into their moment. "How about I take a picture of you two before we fly that kite?" "Yay. Let's do it." Amara squealed, bouncing on her toes. Elowen turned to Adrian, her eyes sparkling with joy. "That sounds great. Come on, Amara, let's pose." The two of them struck a playful pose, Amara holding her hands in the air as if she were already flying the kite. Adrian raised his phone, capturing the perfect moment. "Say kites," he prompted, and their voices rang out in unison. "Kites." As he lowered the phone, Adrian felt a rush of warmth. The love shared between them felt like a tangible force, enveloping him in its embrace. "Let's go find a good spot," Elowen suggested, her voice full of excitement. They walked deeper into the park, finally settling on a small hill that overlooked the sprawling greenery below. Amara was practically bouncing in place, her impatience evident. "Can we fly it now, Daddy?" "Just a second, champ," Adrian replied, kneeling to unravel the string. "We have to make sure it's ready first." Elowen watched, a smile playing on her lips as she admired Adrian's focused expression. "You've got this, Adrian. Just like you do with everything else." He looked up, a hint of self-deprecation in his smile. "You say that like I'm some sort of expert. I'm just a dad trying to keep up with a 5-year-old. "Exactly. A dad who's doing an amazing job," she reassured him, her voice steady and filled with conviction. With the kite finally ready, Adrian helped Amara hold the spool as they ran together, the wind catching the fabric and lifting it into the sky. "Look, Mommy, it's flying," Amara shouted, her voice tinged with pure delight as the kite soared higher and higher. "It's beautiful, just like you," Elowen responded, her heart full as she watched her daughter's face light up. Adrian, too, felt a rush of pride as he watched Amara's joy. "Just wait until it does a loop," he called, urging her to run even faster. As they took turns running and managing the kite, laughter and shouts of encouragement filled the air. The simple act of flying a kite transformed into a memorable family experience, strengthening their bond in ways words could hardly express. However, amid the joy, shadows of the past lurked just beneath the surface. The laughter of their friends echoed in Adrian's mind, reminding him of the ridicule he once faced for choosing a simpler life with Elowen. He glanced at her, her hair dancing in the wind, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "Hey, Elowen," he said, drawing her attention. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" She paused for a moment, her eyes reflecting understanding. "All the time. Sometimes it feels like a dream, doesn't it?" Adrian nodded, his expression earnest. "I used to think that success was all about wealth and status. But now I realize that the real success is right here." He gestured to Amara, who was now dancing around them, a whirlwind of energy and laughter. Elowen stepped closer, their hands intertwining. "You've changed so much, Adrian. I love seeing this side of you. And I love you for bringing it out of me," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Their moment was interrupted by Amara, who came running back, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Daddy, Mommy, look what I can do," she exclaimed, proceeding to twirl around, her arms outstretched like the kite soaring above them. Elowen and Adrian exchanged a knowing smile, their hearts swelling with pride. "You're a natural kiddo," Adrian cheered, and Amara beamed at the praise. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting golden hues across the park, they collapsed onto the grass, breathless and happy. "Best day ever," Amara declared, collapsing into a fit of giggles. Elowen leaned back, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin. "I think it's safe to say we all needed this." Adrian's gaze shifted to Elowen, his heart full. "You know, I wouldn't trade this for anything. Not even $1 billion. Elowen chuckled softly, nudging him playfully. "Not even $1 billion? That's quite the statement." "Absolutely," he affirmed, sincerity lacing his tone. "I've had money, I've had success, but this," he gestured to their daughter, to Elowen, to the moment they were sharing. "This is everything." As the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden light over their family, Adrian and Elowen knew that together, they could face anything. The laughter that once felt so distant had returned, echoing through the park, a testament to their resilience, love, and the life they were building, one joyful moment at a time. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over Griffith Park. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and families filled the park, laughter echoing under the sprawling trees. Adrian Stiles stood beside a playground, watching his daughter, Amara, with a sense of pride swelling in his chest. She was 6 now, a whirlwind of energy with curls bouncing as she played tag with a group of children. "Look, Daddy, I'm the fastest," she exclaimed, her laughter infectious as she sprinted away from her friends. Adrian couldn't help but smile, The weight of the world momentarily lifted as he absorbed the joy radiating from his daughter. Faster than the wind, he called back, his voice booming playfully. Elowen Pierce, Adrian's partner and the mother of Amara, was seated on a nearby bench, her eyes twinkling as she watched the scene unfold. There was a softness to her expression, a sense of contentment that had blossomed over the years. She looked up, meeting Adrian's gaze, and they shared a moment of unspoken understanding. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but here they were, stronger together. "Do you remember the first time we brought her here?" Elowen asked, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. Adrian chuckled, shaking his head. "You mean when we thought she'd just sit quietly on the blanket with her toys?" Elowen laughed, the sound light and joyful. "Yes, and instead, she took off like a rocket the moment we turned our backs." "Yeah, and you nearly had a heart attack trying to chase her down," he teased, a playful glint in his eye. "Okay, maybe I did," she admitted, feigning seriousness. "But I'd do it again in a heartbeat." As they shared this light moment, a familiar figure caught Adrian's eye. He squinted against the sun, recognizing the tall frame of one of his former business partners, Mark, making his way toward them. "Speak of the devil," Adrian muttered under his breath. The tension in his stomach tightened. Mark had always been part of the elite circle that had once ridiculed Adrian for his relationship with Elowen. "Hey, look who it is," Elowen said, her voice brightening. "Should we say hi?" Adrian hesitated, the shadows of doubt creeping back into his mind. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he confessed. "Why not?" "We're not the people we were back then," she reminded him gently. "Besides, they're probably not the people they were either. Let's show them how happy we are." "You're right," he said, drawing in a deep breath. "Let's do it." As Mark approached, Adrian could see the surprise on his face. "Adrian." "Elowen," he called out, his tone a mix of disbelief and curiosity. "Wow, it's been ages." "Hey, Mark," Adrian replied, forcing a smile. "How have you been?" "Busy as always," Mark said, his gaze shifting to Amara, who was now climbing the jungle gym with a sense of determination. "And I see you've been busy too." "She's adorable." "Thanks," Adrian said, his chest swelling with pride. "She keeps us on our toes." Mark's expression softened as he watched Amara play. "I've got to say, I didn't expect to see you here of all places." "Why is that?" Elowen asked, her curiosity piqued. "Well, you know, all the talk back then," Mark trailed off, scratching his head awkwardly. "I mean, the jokes, the assumptions. I was surprised to hear you'd settled down." Adrian felt a rush of old frustrations surfacing, but Elowen placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "People change," she said, her voice steady. "Sometimes it takes a leap of faith to find out what really matters." Mark nodded, the weight of his previous judgments hanging uncomfortably between them. "I guess I never really thought about it that way. I mean, I was part of that crowd. We were a bunch of idiots, honestly." "Yeah, you were," Adrian replied, a smirk creeping onto his face. "But it's good to see you've matured. It's a process for all of us." Mark chuckled, the tension easing slightly. "I've been taking a different path in life lately. I've started working with nonprofits, and it's been eye-opening." Elowen's eyes brightened. "That's wonderful. It's so important to give back." "Yeah, it is," Mark said, glancing at Adrian. "I've seen the impact you're making with your foundation." "It's impressive, man." "Thanks," Adrian replied, surprised by the compliment. "It's been rewarding, to say the least." Just then, Amara's laughter rang out again, pulling everyone's attention. She had successfully climbed to the top of the jungle gym and stood proudly, hands on her hips. "Look at me. I'm the queen of the castle. Queen Amara, ruling her kingdom." Elowen cheered, clapping her hands. "Let's hope she doesn't get too much of a big head," Adrian joked, feeling a warmth spread through him. "Maybe we should have a royal decree to remind her to stay humble," Mark suggested, laughter dancing in his eyes. As they watched Amara play, the atmosphere shifted. The past seemed to dissolve in the face of the present's joy. "You know," Mark said, leaning in slightly, "I never thought I'd say this, but I respect your choice, Adrian. You've built a beautiful family." "Thanks, man," Adrian said, a genuine smile breaking across his face. "It's not always easy, but it's worth it." "Do you think there's still time for me to find something like that?" Mark asked, a hint of vulnerability creeping into his voice. "Absolutely," Elowen replied, her tone encouraging. "You just have to be open to it." "Yeah," Adrian added, his voice steady. "And don't be afraid to take risks. Love is worth every chance you take." The three of them stood in companionable silence, the sounds of the park enveloping them. Adrian could feel the lingering shadows of their past judgments fading, replaced by a tentative camaraderie. "Maybe we should grab a coffee sometime," Mark proposed, breaking the quiet. "Catch up more?" Adrian exchanged a glance with Elowen, who nodded slightly. "I'd like that," he said, his voice growing firmer. "It would be nice to reconnect." As they made plans, Amara bounded over, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Daddy, look what I can do," she shouted, demonstrating a new balancing trick on the playground beam. "Careful, Queen," Adrian called out, a mix of pride and concern in his voice. Elowen chuckled, watching their daughter with affectionate eyes. "She's fearless, just like her father." "Let's hope she doesn't inherit my clumsiness," Adrian replied, feigning worry. "Too late for that," Elowen teased, her laughter lifting the mood further. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Adrian felt a sense of peace wash over him. The journey had been long and filled with obstacles, but standing here today, surrounded by the love of his family and the tentative acceptance of his past, he realized how far they had come. "Together is where we belong," he thought, watching Amara play and feeling Elowen's hand intertwine with his. In that moment, all the laughter, the struggles, and the triumphs felt like threads weaving a beautiful tapestry of their lives, a tapestry that neither ridicule nor doubt could tear apart. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue across the park as Adrian and Elowen strolled hand in hand, their laughter mingling with the sounds of children playing nearby. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and the air was filled with warmth and the fragrance of blooming flowers. Their daughter, Amara, was a whirlwind of energy, her laughter ringing out like music as she chased after a small group of children playing tag. "Look at her go," Elowen exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with pride. She watched as Amara darted past a cluster of trees, her little legs moving as fast as they could carry her. "She's going to be an athlete, just you wait." Adrian chuckled, his heart swelling with joy as he watched Amara. "Or a future CEO, running her own company," he teased, nudging Elowen playfully. "Can you imagine? Amara Stiles, tech mogul at 6. Elowen shook her head, a smile breaking across her face. "Let's not rush her into the corporate world just yet. Let her be a kid for a little while longer." They found a bench beneath a large oak tree, the leaves whispering in the gentle breeze. Adrian settled down, pulling Elowen beside him. The couple sat quietly for a moment, their fingers intertwined as they watched Amara play. "Do you remember our first picnic here?" Elowen asked, her voice softening with nostalgia. "It feels like a lifetime ago." Adrian looked over at her, his expression turning thoughtful. "How could I forget? You brought that awful store-bought sandwich," he laughed, the memory lighting up his face. "I was so worried about what my friends would think if they saw me eating it. But you didn't care. You just dug in, and I realized that you were the most refreshing person I had ever met." Elowen chuckled, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I was just trying to keep it simple. I didn't know I was going to have to impress a millionaire." She paused, her gaze drifting to Amara. "But I suppose you saw something in me that day, something worth keeping." Adrian's expression softened. "I saw a lot more than that," he admitted, squeezing her hand. "I saw someone who wasn't afraid to be herself, even when the world around her was all about appearances. That's what drew me to you." Elowen met his gaze, the sincerity in his eyes making her heart race. "And that's what keeps me here," she said softly. "You never tried to change me. You embrace me for who I am." Just then, a familiar voice called out from across the park. "Adrian." "Elowen." They turned to see a group of their old friends approaching, laughter spilling from their lips as they waved. Adrian felt his stomach drop. It had been years since he'd seen them, and he wasn't sure how they would react to his family. "Hey, it's been ages," Adrian called out, forcing a smile as they approached. "Wow, look at you two." And little Amara, one of the friends, a tall man named Jake, beamed as he reached out to ruffle Amara's hair. You've got a real cutie on your hands." "Thanks. She's a handful, but we wouldn't trade her for anything," Elowen replied, her voice bright despite the sudden tension. As the group settled onto the grass around them, Adrian could feel the familiar currents of judgment brewing beneath the surface. "So, how's the tech world treating you?" Jake asked, his tone light but with an edge of curiosity. "It's been a wild ride," Adrian replied, glancing at Elowen before continuing. "I've been focusing a lot on my foundation lately, helping families in need." "Your foundation?" A woman named Sarah echoed, her brows furrowed. "I didn't know you were doing that. When did you become so philanthropic?" Adrian felt the weight of her words. "I guess becoming a father changed my perspective," he said, his voice steady. "It made me realize how fortunate I am and how important it is to give back." "Right," Jake chimed in, his expression shifting. "And how's it feel to trade in the high life for, family life?" There was an awkward silence. Elowen's grip on Adrian's hand tightened, and he could feel the tension radiating off of her. "It feels good," Adrian replied, his voice firm. "I've found more joy in these past few years than I ever did in the parties and the money." "Really?" Sarah asked, tilting her head. "You don't miss the excitement? The glamour? The freedom?" Adrian glanced at Elowen, who was watching him intently. "I've learned that true freedom is about choice," he replied, his voice growing more passionate. "Choosing to be present for my family, choosing to make a difference in the world. That's the real thrill." The group stared at him, their expressions a mix of surprise and confusion. "I don't know, man. Sounds a bit boring," Jake said, trying to lighten the mood, but Adrian could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Boring is overrated," Elowen interjected, her voice steady. "We've built something beautiful together, and it's not about what others think. It's about living authentically, creating memories that matter." The group went silent, their expressions shifting from amusement to contemplation. Amara, oblivious to the tension, ran up to her father, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Daddy, look, I caught a butterfly," she exclaimed, holding out her tiny hands, cupping a delicate creature that fluttered helplessly. "Wow, that's amazing, sweetheart," Adrian said, his voice full of warmth. "You're such a little explorer." The friends watched, their previous skepticism fading as they witnessed the bond between father and daughter. Adrian felt a swell of pride, grounding him in this moment. "Can I hold it?" Elowen asked, leaning down to peek at the butterfly. "Oh, it's so pretty. You're so lucky, Amara." Amara giggled, her eyes shining with delight as she carefully transferred the butterfly into her mother's hands. "It's magical, Mommy. Can we keep it?" Elowen laughed, her heart full. "Let's let it go, sweetheart. It belongs in the wild, just like you." The atmosphere lightened, and even their old friends seemed captivated by the tender moment. "You guys really are something else," Jake said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I never thought I'd see the day when Adrian Stiles would be a family man." Adrian smiled, feeling a sense of warmth wash over him. "Well, life has a funny way of surprising you," he said, glancing at Elowen, who was watching him with soft eyes. "I wouldn't change a thing." As they continued to chat, the barriers that had once separated them began to crumble. Stories were exchanged, laughter echoed through the park, and slowly but surely, the judgment faded into acceptance. Okay, Sarah said, her tone lightening. "Maybe we underestimated you guys. You're kind of inspiring." "Yeah," Jake added, crossing his arms, a small grin breaking through. Who knew Adrian could actually settle down? Adrian chuckled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Guess we're full of surprises," he said, looking at Elowen with a love that spoke volumes. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the park, Adrian felt a sense of peace envelop him. Despite the past and the judgments, here he was with the love of his life and their daughter, surrounded by friends who were finally beginning to understand the choices he had made. In that moment, with laughter and joy surrounding him, Adrian realized that he had truly found his place in the world, not in the glitz and glamour, but in the simple, profound love of family. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden light over the expansive park in Los Angeles. It was a typical weekend afternoon, the kind that invited families to gather, children to play, and friends to reunite. Adrian and Elowen sat on a picnic blanket, the vibrant colors of the fabric a stark contrast to the green grass surrounding them. Their daughter, Amara, was off to the side, chasing after bubbles that floated dreamily into the air. Laughter filled the space, a sound so pure it brought a smile to Elowen's face each time she heard it. "Look at her," Elowen exclaimed, her eyes sparkling as Amara jumped up and down, trying to catch the elusive bubbles. "She's going to be an artist one day, you know."